Good morning, this is Suzanne, and we're going to get started with our monthly Zoho tips and tricks. Looks like I have Jeff Davis. You're currently muted. If you'd like to participate in the tips and tricks webinar, you can just unmute yourself, or you can use the chat box that's down on the lower right-hand corner. So welcome, Jeff. And as our usual format, I have 3 tips and tricks for using Zoho products that I'll run through today. It should be pretty short, 10 to 15 minutes. Just have a couple quick few tips. Again, feel free to interact vocally or send me a chat. Let me pop that open so I make sure I look at it. And we'll go through. So let me go ahead and share my Zoho account. There we go. Okay. So again, I'm going to run through 3 quick tips. The first one is about data sharing, and I'll get into that a little bit more. The next one is a quick little tip on how to make the subject field a pick list for the task module. So we'll go over that. And lastly, it's actually more like a little warning or tip for data migration. So, as you're ramping up on your use of your Zoho CRM, there's a lot of different ways that you can get data into the system starting out. And one of the ways is to what they call migrate data from another database. So let's start out with that one because that's a quick and easy one. You can export data from some other database and then bring it into CRM using what CRM calls a migration process. And my warning is there, if you have your CRM all set up and customized, and you've got your pick lists identified and in your values set of what you want to be available for that particular field, then when you migrate your data in, if there are other values that you're migrating in for that field, they will get added to the pick list, whether it's a misspelling, whether you've got a couple values. Basically, if your data is not super clean and you have different values that are spelled differently, they're all going to come into your pick list as an option set. So you really need to, when you're migrating your data from another database, you just want to make sure that it's really cleaned up before you bring it in, because you'll run into problems like that and it'll start getting really messy in CRM. Okay, so that's tip number 1, and that's all about just being very cautious when you're migrating data from another database, and make sure that you clean it up pretty well before you bring it over. Okay, so that is tip number 1. What I was going to show you is a pick list that got out of control, but I'm just going to move on from that. I think you get the idea that you can all of a sudden be getting these long, ugly pick lists that have basically the same value, just maybe misspelled or whatever. So we want to make sure we clean that up before we bring it in. Okay, tip number 2. Let me pop open the chat window again. Okay, so tip number 2, this is an interesting one. I'm going to go into the task module. So if you haven't used this module yet, oops, just trying to size that so I can see everything. CRM, its makeup is, you have your leads and contacts and your deals modules. You also have the activities module, and the activities module is made up of tasks, events, and calls that you can add to your other records. So task is one of those types of activities, and that's basically just just assigning yourself or your coworkers tasks to do with a due date and a priority. So it's kind of like your to-do list, and it's a way you can manage your workload. So in the task module, I'm going to go into my setup. So in the task module, there's a task subject. Sorry, I didn't want that. I want the gear. So I'm going into setup, going to modules and fields, and I'm going to pop open tasks. So if you haven't been back in the setup area, I know I kind of popped into that really quick. I'm going back into the setup area where you can change the fields on your forms, change the organization of them, change the values that are provided in a pick list. So that's where I am right now. I went to the gear wheel setup, modules and fields, and I'm going to click on tasks and open the standard layout. And here's the tip. So subject is basically just a text field. So you could, when you're defining a task, you can just free type anything in for a subject. But if you find that you manage your tasks pretty tightly and the subject tends to be the same thing every time, you can turn subject into a pick list so that you don't have to type the same subject name every time. You can just pick it from a pick list. So let me show you how to do that. We have subject and it's a single line field. I'm going to click the dot, 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 and I'm going to do edit properties. So when I come back here, I see I've actually already got some pre-filled options. But when I go to a task record, I'm not seeing those. So let me pop into another, I need a tab, CRM. I'm going to pop open a new task record and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. All right, this needs to go down here. So let's go to, I'm just going to open a deal record and I'm going to add, here's where you would add a task over here in the open activities, and I'm going to say new task. And notice my subject line is in a pick list, but I could just free type anything in there. So I can just retype anything in there. But I also have this lookup here. So if I wanted to find something, I can just click on that. And now here's where I see my subject. If I wanted to make it only a lookup, so this option I can free type and I can also search for a standard one. So I'm going to cancel out of this and we're going to go back. And I'm thinking they might have changed this on me, but we'll go through anyway and see what happens. So if you wanted it to only be a pick list, then choose a default value. So I'm going to choose default value as email and say done. And now I'm going to come back to my deal record. I'm going to reload this page, which is hugely important when you're making changes to the form. And you're working in a different tab, you want to reload the page to make sure that the new changes take effect. Okay, so now I'm going to come to task, and they did change it. Okay, so all right, when I wrote this tip, the only way you could get to the pick list was by setting that default, but now it looks like they made it a little bit better. So now it is open where you could either free type or choose this to look up one of your pick list options. And going back in here, oops, wrong one. So same tip, little different way about it. I can also change these values. So these are the standard values. I can make these anything I want. I can make that email follow-up. Oops. Or type in anything and just say done. So I'm going to get rid of my default value. Done. So this is another example of how this is a living, breathing product, and things are always, always getting better. So before it was kind of a little convoluted, which is why I made it into a tip. But now it's really straightforward, and you just have the little lookup thing there that you can use. So that is task subject lookup tip. So that is tip number 2. And then my last tip for this webinar is about data sharing. So I'm going to go back into the setup area just to give a quick lesson on data sharing. So basically, if the default settings in CRM when you open it out of the box is for data privacy. So what that means is that each user can only see their data records that are assigned to them. So how we change that, how we modify that is under this value security control, or under this setup value security control. So under there, I have my profiles, roles, and data sharing settings. So these are more global settings. Profiles basically control what permissions a user will have. These are the standard ones, administrator and standard. So administrator is all powerful. They can do anything, which includes changing forms and generating workflow and all that. The standard is just basically all the standard permissions without the administrative permissions. So that's basically what a user is allowed to do. The roles is a hierarchy, and that basically defines how the data is shared across the CRM. So if the data settings are set to private, then basically you can and you assign, every user needs to be assigned a role. So say you've got a user that's assigned as the sales manager, they're going to be able to see salespersons and assistants data, but a salesperson won't be able to see sales manager data or assistant data. So it's set up as a hierarchy. You can also, within a role, you can elect to share with peers or not share with peers. And what that means is if you have two users that are set as salespersons, they can either see each other's data or not, depending on whether that checkbox is checked. And I can show you what that looks like. Edit that, and here's that share data with peers checkbox. Okay, so those are global settings of sharing data. And then the last one, data sharing settings. You can open it wide open and make everything public read write. And once you do that, the roles don't apply. So once you change a module to public read write delete, then you're giving everybody full access to everybody's records in that module. So be careful with that if data privacy is an issue. So in here you can hit edit all default permissions, and then you get this radio button, situation, then you would click. So let's change this to private, or change some of these to private. Click save. And now what you need to do is click compute all, and that'll kind of reapply the privacy settings for the new settings. So you click that compute all, and that resets it. So that's applying the sharing data rules for the modules. Okay, so that's general. That's the lead into the tip. So that's kind of general data sharing and how you control that. And again, that's global. So this is on a module level. If I make deals public, I'm making all deals public. If I make them private, I'm making all the records in the deal module private. So what if you wanted to be able to pick and choose what records you wanted to share with what users? So, everything's kind of clamped down, everything's private, and you really just want to share, a handful of records with another user. How would you do that? So let me show you. So I'm going to get out of the setup area. And I'm going to open my coworker, Corey Bobka's record. And this is the way you share a specific record. So you open the record, and under this ... menu, there's a share option. So I'm going to click share. And I can choose which user. I just have one other user in my system. I can choose the user. So if you had more than one, you can choose multiple users. And then I can choose what access I want to give them, read only, read write, or full access, which includes delete. Okay, and then I can also choose or not choose to give them access to the related list. So that would be, that's all of this. So that's emails, activities, anything that's related to that record. I also have the option to selectively share that information as well. Okay, and then I say share, and it's setting, this is just a little pop-up saying it's sharing it, and now it's shared. So if I logged in as demo user, I would be able to see Corey's record. Okay, so that is tip number 3. If you have any questions, I'm happy to address them. Okay, there you are. Hello, Jeff. So I just unmuted you. If you had any questions about any of the 3 tips, or if you have any questions in general, I'd be happy to address them now. Or we can just close down the webinar. All right, I'm going to take silence as you have no questions. All right, well, thanks so much for tuning in live for this webinar. And just want to let you know that we record our webinars every month. So we have a whole suite of recorded videos of tips and tricks for over the last couple years on the website, marksgroup.net, that you can browse. And I'll take this moment to also plug, we're starting up a whole training site. So we're coming up with basically Zoho curriculum, and you can subscribe to the training site and get and tune into live training sessions, which are longer in nature and tend to focus, do a deeper dive on various topics. So again, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you have a great day.